Hey everyone. So instead of doing a top 10 today or anything else that involves me showing my computer screen, I'm going to talk about a discussion. Something that we've been getting a lot of in terms of movies coming out, something that we've seemed to be a lot like. It's like this. What is your most anticipated movie of the year? A sequel, right? What's your second most anticipated movie of the year? Let me guess. Is it a sequel? What about your third? A sequel. What's your whole top 10 of most anticipated movies? They're all sequels, aren't they? Now, granted, you could argue that's just because, because, like, we know of the original movie, so, we know how much we love it and we're ready to see more of that movie as opposed to new ideas. But a lot of people complain that we've been getting way too many sequels and that our world of original ideas just isn't as it used to be. Is that true? Well, it depends. I think it depends based on when a sequel is needed. So, take this year for example. Sequels like Dune or Inside Out, those are movies that we all can agree do deserve sequels. But other movies like Kung Fu Panda or Gladiator, the sequel coming out, like to wonder, do they need sequels? Do we really need another film setter? Like, didn't those movies already work? Like, is a sequel necessary? Do we need it? Is this right? Is this fair? And today I'm going to go ahead and share my personal thoughts. I'm going to talk about what I think a sequel should work, when it should be made, what qualifies a movie to be sequel worthy, and those movies that don't need a sequel. That's kind of going to be the discussion for today. I'm going to share my personal thoughts on what kind of movie should deserve a sequel, what kind of movie is okay to have a sequel, and what kind of movies just, don't need one. Really don't need to have a sequel. So let me go ahead and share. So essentially, let's go ahead and narrow this down with movies that I do believe did deserve the sequel and why it did deserve it. And then I'll share that same opinion on movies that don't deserve it. To start off, let's talk about Star Wars. Granted, yes, you all know Star Wars. It's still my all-time favorite franchise. I don't care if it's toxic. I love it. And I don't care what bad stuff comes out of it. I still love it, okay? I don't care. You can't stop me. See this? Can't stop me. I don't care. Say what you want. I don't care. Anyway, a sequel to Star Wars. There is actually a lot to think about with that. Because, and I don't know how many Star Wars fans still know this, but the original Star Wars movie to come out, the first one to come out, A New Hope, it wasn't Phantom Menace. Stop saying that. A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie, was only called Star Wars when it first came out because, the franchise wasn't a thing yet. So, what's to know? Where's the New Hope from? So, when it first came out, it was just called Star Wars. And it wasn't ever intended to start any sequels. They never wanted it to become a franchise. Because, George Lucas hated the production of the movie. The production for the movie was hell. So much happened, and he didn't even want to attend the premiere because he thought the movie would be hated by so many people. It blew box office records. It became beloved. Everyone loved it. It became a big staple in science fiction movies. And to that point, George Lucas said, okay, sequels. And that's where we got the Star Wars we all know and love today. Or at least some people still know and love today. Still love it. Anyway, so let's think about this. Did A New Hope end in a way that made it sequel worthy? Well, yes, it did. Now, essentially, the movie ended on a note where everyone lived, quote unquote, happily ever after. It ended with Luke and Han and Chewie, supposedly, getting their medals for destroying the Death Star, which supposedly meant they saved the galaxy. So that meant we all would think, okay, that's a farewell to this movie. But there are some things that make it still work as a sequel. For example, Darth Vader is still alive because they showed that after the Death Star blew up, Vader was still alive. He was on a ship and it showed him fly off. So that was something that we all knew would mean, what's with him? Where's he going? What's he going to do next? And there is still mystery surrounding how many more galaxies and how many more people there are with how much has been said in this movie. So for that note, that obviously means there's more to come. And that's kind of the thing I gotta say for this. Empire Strikes Back works because the first Star Wars movie, none of the main characters, I don't mean like entire cast of main characters, I mean like main, like the lead protagonist character. Luke That being Luke Skywalker, or maybe at least, I think like four of the characters in the movie had a lead. And because none of those characters were killed off or taken away from the story in any way, or the fact that the whole setup, the idea hasn't been altered in any way, that's where a sequel should work. So like since Luke, Leia, Han, C-3PO, and R2-D2, all those characters, they still survived and are still with each other, still doing what they do, didn't retire or anything, then it's simple to say that there is still stuff you can do with them. And that the whole setup, the idea that being a galaxy full of venture, that part wasn't altered in any big way, considering that Darth Vader is still alive and that there's still more galaxies to explore. That's kind of where the sequel is good. That the movie didn't need the sequel, it didn't require it, but it did have it did have the stuff, the elements to make the sequel work. So that being said, the sequel definitely did work. Now, there's controversy surrounding if the sequels, if those need to exist. Well, my argument is they're worthy of existing. I know I'm still the minority for saying that, but the thing is, Return of the Jedi, yeah, it did end with the second Death Star blowing up, Darth Vader dying and such, but again, the main lead character are still alive and are still doing their thing. So, granted, and there was, again, still lots that could happen, because, like, even after the Death Star 2 blew up and Darth Vader and Palpatine died, accordingly, not everything was gone. So obviously there would still be more time for torture. And yes, Lucas himself was planning on making more movies too. So for all the haters that think that the sequel trilogy shouldn't exist in any way, that's kind of a big debate. Okay, you could say that it was badly written, badly planned out, but saying that there's no reason for more Star Wars movies to exist isn't really the biggest argument I feel so many people should agree with. Just saying, just my thoughts, okay? So anyway, let's talk about another series that follows that same category I feel like I should bring up. Toy Story. Yeah, Toy Story. I love Toy Story too. I love all Toy Story movies. Anyway, Toy Story is a series of animated films that I hold most dearly to. Could you tell? So, naturally, let's talk about if the movies deserve to exist. They do. Toy Story 1 ended essentially with Woody and Buzz returning home to Andy, and ending with them sort of reuniting with everybody at a new house on Christmas time, which makes Toy Story a Christmas movie. But anyway, it ended with them still being alive, still working as they are, still being the characters that they are, and that the whole idea of them coming to life when no one's around is still an active thing that happening. I mean, even though Sid, the villain, or so what, learned about it and pretty much got scarred, he's an outcast. Who cares? Main characters are worthy of knowing. So yeah, since nothing got altered in terms of the setup story or with the main lead characters, then a sequel is necessary. And yeah, with Toy Story 2, that sort of happened too. Nothing happened that revolved around the whole setup being altered or the main characters being killed off or leaving the situations. It just ended with how things went. So yeah, for that reason, there definitely should be a third one. And now let's talk about the thing that I know more people complain about too, the fourth one. I know a lot of people, even Toy Story fans, thinking that the fourth one was a cash grab and shouldn't have existed since Toy Story 3 ended things off perfectly. And while I will admit, when I heard about Toy Story 4 coming out, I did sort of kind of think that at a first note. Looking more into it, I gotta say, maybe it's not that bad of a choice. Because even though Toy Story 3 did end with Andy saying goodbye to his toys and giving them away, the toys are still toys. I mean, Andy, I'm gonna admit, he isn't really the main character in these movies. He plays a big part with them, and he does have focus, but he isn't really the lead character. Okay, the toys are the ones taking the spotlight for the movies. He's more of their like guardian, their owner, and his screen time for each movie is a good amount, just not enough to make him as important to our focus. We just see him as the guy that everyone looks up to. So truth be told, yeah, him leaving has a big part in this, but the toys are still toys that come to life when no one's around. And they still are being played with. They're still with each other and such. If the movie went for the different ending of Woody going to college with him and the rest of the toys being enjoying themselves in the storage, then I would say that Toy Story 3 closed things off. But because they're all still together and still doing their thing, still the whole setup is still the same, I think a Toy Story 4 did seem like a good choice. Not that it had to happen. Again, it wasn't something that was 100% needed to happen. But for it happening, I can accept it as a fine choice. I mean, we did get a bunch of shorts for Toy Story after the third film, so I mean, we all saw that there was still some stuff to be told after Andy's departure. And now, what about the rumors of the Toy Story 5 coming out? Well, I first heard about it, I was like, oh, okay, does this seem necessary? And it would work only on the sole condition that, remember at the end of Toy Story 4 when Woody was just saying goodbye to everybody? Now, the only way Toy Story 5 will work is if they show that Woody wasn't leaving forever, and that this was more of a vacation for him, more of a different little ride he's going to spend a few weeks or months or whatever doing, and that he will return to be with them. If that happens, if that's the case, then a Toy Story 5 can work. But if they're going to focus reliably on the rest of the characters and just leave Woody on his own, then I don't know. I don't really think they should do that. But yeah, it can work. Just as long as a sequel can work, just as long as the last movie and didn't end with any of the lead characters being killed off or removed from this group, and the whole situation, the whole setup for the whole idea for the movies wasn't altered in any big way, then that's where a sequel can work. So that brings up the big portion of when it doesn't work, when those situations do apply, and when the sequels still happen. I have two I want to talk about that follow that problem. First up, Fast and Furious. Yeah, we all see Fast and Furious as a cash grab nowadays. And truth be told, I didn't want to follow that bandwagon, but I did. I got part of it. So, because yeah, I'm seeing it now. Fast and Furious movies were really kicking up. When I was seeing F9 coming out, I wanted to catch up with all the movies. Because like at the time, I've only seen the first one. So, I went ahead and went through every movie so I can get caught up. And that's when I realized, yeah, they kind of were scratching their surface there. Furious 7 ended with Brian O'Connor, one of the leads, leaving, going out. He isn't killed off, but he is leaving Dom to go live with his family. Essentially, he left the area and is done with his whole racing action gimmick to go be a family man. I know that was done because the actor Paul Walker unfortunately passed away from a car accident, which still is pretty sad to think about. It still was a good departure. And the ending did actually make me tear up a little bit. I'll be honest, I actually found that little tribute they did pretty nice. So that's when I went ahead and went to the 8th one and realized this really doesn't seem right. Because without the one with Brian being gone away, and considering that he is a lead character, yeah, that just doesn't work. I mean, the whole gimmick's the same, but with him gone, we're just now stuck with these other characters who just don't seem as interesting without him. And I know that may be a little picky. I mean, you can still work without one person. If one person of your life leaves, like if a friend leaves or so, you can still live on. But this is different. But this is in terms of the whole movie's big adventure that it went through. It seemed like Furious 7 ended the adventure in a way that worked nicely. I mean, yeah, they did sort of reveal a little twist portion, revealing one guy who got in prison was saying, I'm going to come back for you or whatever. Still, you still had one of the lead characters be taken away. He's gone. So that just felt too heartwarming. We really did not need to see more stuff happen because without one of the lead characters, we're just making other characters try to be as more important. And it doesn't work if they were never intended to be that important in the first place. If they were never intended to have such a ginormous importance to the story, then making them important isn't always going to work. It may work if you have good tensions to it, but most of the time it won't. And truth be told, when F9 came out, I just wasn't as excited to see it as I used to be. And when I left, I realized, yeah, no, this isn't working anymore. And then I saw Fast X. I knew it would suck. It did. And now I don't want to see the next one because, goddamn, they're not ending this franchise. I thought that Fast X would be their way of concluding, but no, they're doing it still. Okay, I was gonna be perfectly fine. I was just gonna willingly accept them going after Furious 7 if they were ready to just end on Fast X. But then when they decide to go ahead and make it a two-parter and just make more movies, that's where I realized, no, this just doesn't work. Okay, like seriously, that disgraces the idea I went for. That them removing a lead character from the story and still continuing with the characters they got, giving more attention to them when they never needed it, and just not really needing to do more. So yeah, the Fast and Furious franchise is milked. I didn't want to admit it, but I have to admit it now. This franchise is being milked. It's being milked like a cow. Moo. Anyway, another franchise that I recently decided I really think is going too far ahead is Despicable Me. And yes, this is coming from after seeing the fourth movie. I didn't realize, I never thought of it, but yeah. The fourth movie is when I realized they needed to stop a long time ago. It's funny, that's two Universal movies that are being milked. Anyway, Despicable Me. The whole gimmick, what's the whole idea of Despicable Me? It's about a villain who raises three kids, and essentially they make him feel much more wholesome around. He seems to get a lot more wholesome with them, and seems his whole villainous side arc doesn't seem to really become his main gimmick. That's a good idea, you know? A guy who started off with evil intentions gets very wholesome with three kids. That worked really nicely. So, would a sequel work after the first movie ended with him kind of, being not as villainous? Yeah, because even though he isn't really much of a giant villain, he is still, like, him. I mean, he's still the way he is. He's just not doing evil things anymore. He's just kind of being dark and gruesome, like a goth type. I'm not going to say goth, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say. So, yeah, a second movie would work, kind of showing where he would go after this, where him being this kind of person would lead him to. But that's where things got messy. Because that second movie ended with him getting married and essentially becoming a undercover detective. So yeah, he's just become a completely different person. And for that reason, I think we've all reached the point where everything's good. They've all had their fun. Now they're on to new exciting things. The series is at end. I mean, I know it's only been 2 movies, but the second one ended things. It ended the whole main arc that the first movie had, and it gave the characters a close. And then we got a third one, which I was super young at the time, so I obviously didn't realize this. I accept it, but now I realize is just not needed because we don't have the characters we used to have. I mean, they do sort of reference the previous movie situations, but they don't really continue with them. Like, Despicable Me 3 had a chance to maybe go back to the first movie's tropes, since it did sort of tease that in some of the trailers. But no, it didn't. It didn't. We just got a new adventure that's got a completely new gimmick. It's a completely new setup. So, yeah, no. They needed to stop after 2 where things actually ended. The whole gimmick was actually coming to a close. And yeah, then when I saw Despicable Me 4, that's when I realized that, yeah, they should have stopped after 2. I didn't realize it until I saw the fourth one. And granted, I will admit, I actually did not dislike the third or fourth one. It actually didn't bother me too much. They were still not needed, okay? You could still like a movie and not want it to exist. You don't probably won't like it as much, but it is possible, rare but possible. But anyway, yeah, this series should just stop. Now, what about exceptions? I will say the spin-offs for not just Despicable Me, but for any movie. If any movie franchise has a spin-off, like, because I bring it up, because Despicable Me, of course, has the Minions movies. Those are spin-offs. If you release a spin-off after your movie comes to a close, it's acceptable. And this goes for all franchises that have spin-offs. Like, every franchise I know and love has a spin-off. I mean, Star Wars has spin-offs, Marvel has spin-offs, Toy Story had spin-offs. They had a spin-off movie about Buzz Lightyear that kind of went under. But anyway, yeah, they have spin-offs. So if they release a spin-off after a satisfying conclusion, does it work? Yeah, it works. Because even though we're getting more of an adventure from the same franchise, it's a spin-off. It's not continuing the main trope. It's just showing sort of a side character, how they began, or kind of showing another situation occurring in that same universe. So, like, because it's not continuing the main storyline, it still works. It can still work fine. I mean, even if it comes out after you see a satisfying conclusion, it's not going to, like, continue after that conclusion. It's just going to show a new adventure. Even if it does take place after the conclusion, it's not going to follow along with it. It's just going to, be focusing on the new characters and what they do. It's not going to rely on any of the main lead characters, but just what the side characters do. So that's kind of what it is. So I talked about when sequels can happen, but I never really brought up when sequels should happen. That's what I want to bring up. When should a sequel actually need to happen? You may think that's not something that I should think about, because not any move that seems impossible to do, to think about. You may think that that's never a case where a sequel has to happen, is required. But I do think there is a time when it does. When a movie promotes it, when it teases it. You know what I mean. Let's go back to Star Wars, for example. The Empire Strikes Back. It ended with Luke, Leia, C-3PO, and R2-D2 looking out after Lando and Chewie are going away to go get Han. So it didn't end with them destroying another Death Star or stopping anything. It ended with them all just, looking out. Okay, it didn't end with them defeating or anything. It left on a note that says there's more to come. Like if you just put Return of the Jedi right after Empire Strikes Back and remove the credits or anything, then you would buy it. That's what it is. Like, you just put the sequel right after the last movie's ending, and it works well. That's what an abrupt ending is. And when it ends, but it doesn't actually end. When it just ends on a cliffhanger. When a movie ends on a cliffhanger, that's when a sequel should happen. And there are cases where that isn't the case. So let's talk about those movies that have abrupt endings but don't go from there because I guess the movie just didn't perform well. For example, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That movie had a cliffhanger ending with Peter Parker, Spider-Man, finding the Rhino. He was about to swing at the Rhino, and then boom, credits. That's where you thought, okay, so guess we'll have to wait for Amazing Spider-Man 3. But it never happened because, Sony saw that the movie didn't work as well and just oh, no, okay, no, screw it. let's call it the MCU, see if they can work well with Spider-Man. But that's a problem, okay? Like, if you have a cliffhanger ending, you gotta continue from it, okay? Like, if there's a cliffhanger and if you have a movie that ends with a cliffhanger, then truth be told, that you do need to have a sequel. I mean, it doesn't matter when it comes out, like, but as long as you know when it will come out. As long as you like have the cliffhanger ending. Like, when your movie just ends with, them going off for an adventure, then like that we want to see where that adventure leads to. We just don't want it to end and then us just be like, okay, let's see where that goes. I never saw where it went. And that's just the problem, okay? Movies that do that, movies that sub a sequel that they end up never making, that's just a problem. Now, I know there are some movies that could do that in sort of a simple way. For example, Back to the Future. I did recently find out that movie was never meant to have sequels. It was just meant to end with them going off like that. Now, should I complain about that? Well, no, because here's the thing. Honestly, truth be told, it's kind of a 50-50 situation. It's like they acknowledged when the movie ended. When it ended, Doc Brown told them what they need. They told them they gotta go to the future for kids. So like you knew what was gonna happen. You knew what they were gonna do. Like you knew that they were going to hits. And even though there was a lot of surprises, we did eventually get the sequel. And like because they did plan on a sequel. Like I'm sure they weren't. I know they weren't 100% just leaving it as a standalone movie. They did have some plans for sequels. It works fine. Because, like, when you know that they're ready to make the next sequel, when you know that the sequel is being ready to make, then that's where you really got something good going. But, there's just really lots to think about with that. So, yeah, you may think that movies don't always need you may think that there's never such thing as a sequel that's needed. But to me, if your movie has a cliffhanger ending, a sequel is needed. If the movie ends with a cliffhanger, then a sequel is well deserved. It's well meaned. Okay, that's usually the case, and I don't want that to happen with movies that break the rules I just recently talked about. That if a movie destroys the gimmick or kills off a lead character, I don't want that to happen. But if a movie doesn't do that and does have a cliffhanger ending, a sequel is needed. That's just what I think. So I think I pretty much covered everything about sequels, You get my gist, do you? You don't? Well, too bad. That's my opinion. Yep, I think some sequels did deserve to happen. I think that some movies were definitely worthy of a sequel. Maybe not all sequels were needed, but some were. Some may not have been, but can still be worthy of existing. And that doesn't go to the ones that didn't. So, Star Wars sequels, they can work. Fast and Furious sequels, they don't.